Munich, early 1980s. Rain hit the backstage windows in restless streaks while Queen's crew rushed through the concrete corridors of the arena. The crowd outside was already roaring, a low thunder building behind the walls. Every few seconds, the chant rose. Freddie! 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 Inside his dressing room, Freddie Mercury stared at the door. There were 3 locks on it now. There hadn't been 3 locks before. On the table beside him lay a crumpled letter, a bouquet that had been ripped apart, and a photograph he had never posed for, a photograph taken from too close, from too far inside his life. For years, Freddie had believed he could handle anything that came with fame. The screaming. The hotel lobbies full of strangers. The hands reaching, grabbing, pulling. The constant invasion of his space, his body, his time. It was the price of being adored, darling. You took the love with the madness. But that year in Munich, one fan crossed a line Freddie didn't know he had. A line between admiration and obsession. Between devotion and danger. Between being seen and being hunted. What started as a face in the front row, always there, always watching, escalated into letters, appearances in hotel lobbies, and then things showing up that should have never left Freddie's bedroom. And one night, after a concert, he found something on his dressing room table that made his blood run cold. A note that began with, "You looked scared tonight. Don't be. I'll never let anything happen to you. You belong to me now." This is the story of the fan who terrified Freddie Mercury. The night he realized that being loved by millions could still feel like being trapped by one. And the moment a man who owned every stage he walked on locked his dressing room door and admitted he was afraid. It began like any other tour. New city, same routine. Morning interviews, afternoon soundcheck, quick meal, makeup, wardrobe, blackout, roar. By 1980, Freddie had learned to treat tours like elaborate, chaotic theater, same show, different stage, with a rotating cast of faces in the dark. The fans blurred into a single force, a creature with 10,000 heads and one voice. But sometimes, a single face cut through the blur. Munich was like that. The first night, he noticed the usual, banners, flags, shirts with his face on them, badly drawn crowns, flashes of cameras exploding like lightning. Freddie danced through it all, feeding on it, reshaping it, throwing it back at them in the form of high notes and hip thrusts. Then, in the third song, a face in the front row caught his eye. Not because it was beautiful, though it wasn't ugly. Because it was still. While everyone else jumped, screamed, cried, waved, this one face stared with an intensity that sliced clean through the noise. A young man. Dark hair plastered to his forehead with sweat. Eyes wide, unblinking. Jaw clenched. His hands weren't reaching. They were gripping the barrier, knuckles white. Freddie didn't think much of it. You got all sorts at shows, hysterical, frozen, drunk, ecstatic. He filed the image away and moved on, lost in the tidal wave of response he'd worked his whole life to earn. The second night, he saw him again. Same spot. Same expression. Front row, slightly to the left. Arms braced on the barrier, staring up at him like he was something between a god and a ghost. Freddie raised an eyebrow mid-song. Persistent, aren't we? He thought, smirking to himself as he strutted across the stage. He tossed the stranger a glance, an extra flick of the wrist, the way he did sometimes for fans who seemed particularly intense. It was part of the dance, they gave him worship, he gave them acknowledgement. Everyone went home with a story. The man didn't smile. Didn't scream. Didn't faint or throw anything. He just stared harder. By the third night, Freddie mentioned it to Roger in the dressing room, half amused, half annoyed. "There's this chap in the front," he said, dabbing sweat from his chest with a towel. 3 nights in a row, same place. Looks like he's trying to hypnotize me." Roger snorted. "Welcome to having a face everyone wants, darling. I like being adored, Freddie replied. I don't like feeling examined. Probably just a devoted fan, Brian said from his corner, ever the diplomat. They follow us, you know that. I know they follow us, Freddie snapped lightly. It's the way he looks at me. Like he knows something he shouldn't. They laughed it off. But that night, on stage, it wasn't funny. There he was again. Front row. Hands on the barrier. Eyes locked. The setlist blurred. Freddie did what he always did, hit the notes, strutted, teased, seduced. But between lines, between glances at Brian or signals to the crew, his gaze kept snagging on that one face. During Play the Game, while he crooned into the mic stand, he felt it, that prickling sensation between his shoulder blades. Performers knew it. The animal awareness of being watched too closely. When the house lights brightened briefly on a cue, he saw something that made his stomach twist. The man wasn't just watching him. He was mouthing the words Freddie said between songs. Beat for beat. Gesture for gesture. As if he had memorized not just the lyrics, but the patter, the jokes, the way Freddie licked his lips after a particularly hard note. It was like looking into a mirror 2 seconds behind. Freddie faltered on a joke, almost missing the punchline. The crowd didn't notice. The band didn't notice. But he did. After the show, in the corridor outside his dressing room, a security guard approached him. Mr. Mercury. It's Freddie, he corrected automatically, toweling his hair. Right. There's, a fan asking if he can see you. Says he's been at every show. Every show? Freddie frowned. Here. Here, and, in Vienna too, according to him. The muscles in Freddie's shoulders tightened. Send him away, he said. We're not running a meet and greet service. If we start with one, there'll be a bloody line around the block. The guard nodded. Already told him no. He insisted I give you this. He held out an envelope. Freddie sighed. Christ. Put it with the others. But when he reached the dressing room and tossed the envelope onto the table, it skidded and flipped, landing with the flap open. Something slipped out. A photograph. Freddie reached down, annoyed, and froze. It wasn't a concert photo. It was him. Walking out of a side door of a hotel, head down, sunglasses on, tugging his jacket closer around himself. No fans. No press. A quiet, private moment captured from across the street. He turned the photo over. On the back, impressed, deliberate handwriting. I see you when you're not on stage too. His skin crawled. For the first time, Freddie Mercury, the man who fed on attention, who strutted through hotel lobbies like they were extensions of his stage, felt something he almost never did. Watched. Not adored. Hunted. He stared at the letter beside the photo, the envelope still half open. He should have thrown it away. Instead, he picked it up. The paper smelled faintly of cologne. Not the expensive kind he drowned himself in, something cheaper, sharper. The writing was dense, slanted, the ink pressed harder into some words as if the pen had dug into the page with emotion. Freddie sat on the dressing room sofa, towel still around his neck, and began to read. Dear Freddie. You finally saw me tonight. Really saw me. I know you did because you looked at me longer than anyone else, especially during Play the Game. You always look at me longer at that one. I think it's because you know I understand you in ways the others don't. He snorted softly despite himself. Christ. I've been following you for a long time now. Not in a bad way. In a loyal way. I know the difference between the two, even if other people don't. They think fans like me are dangerous. They don't understand that I'm the only one who really sees you. Truly sees you. A thin thread of unease tightened in his chest. I was there in Vienna. 4th row, center. The security kept pushing us back, but I stayed. I watched you the whole time. You were beautiful. You were angry. I could tell you were annoyed with the sound mix because you turned your head half an inch to the left more than you normally do in Bohemian Rhapsody. The others wouldn't notice that. I did. Freddie breathed in, shallow. This wasn't just obsession. This was study. I started learning your patterns so I could be where you'd feel me the strongest. That's why I stand front row, left side, where your eyes always go during the third song. You might think it's random. It isn't. Nothing about you is random. I see the architecture in you. He shifted in his seat, suddenly aware of the mirror behind him reflecting his hunched posture. I know the world thinks they own you. The journalists, the record company, the casual fans who only know, "We will rock you," and "Another one bites the dust." They treat you like a circus animal. They cheer when you move the way they expect and complain when you don't. But I don't want a piece of your stage self. I want you. The man underneath. The man in the hotel doorway in the photograph I sent. Don't be angry, I took it from a distance. I didn't want to scare you. You looked tired that morning. Small. Human. I wanted to run to you, to shield you from everyone who pulls at you without understanding what it costs. Freddie's hands were shaking now. You might think I'm just another fan. I'm not. I've seen you when you drop the act. When your eyes go dead between songs for half a second because you're carrying too much. When your hands tremble on the microphone stand. When you flinch at a flash from the dark. I know the parts of you that hurt. That's why I'm not like the others. I'm not here to take. I'm here to keep you. Freddie's mouth went dry. Tonight, when you pointed toward my side of the crowd, I knew it was for me. It's all right if you pretend it wasn't. I understand the need for secrecy. They'd never let us be close if they knew. The band. The management. The security. They'd try to keep me away from you. They can't. I'll always find you. The dressing room suddenly felt airless. He forced himself to keep reading. You belong to me on and off the stage. Not as property, don't misunderstand me. As responsibility. As connection. You wouldn't be able to sing the way you do if you didn't know someone like me was out there listening the way I do. I'll be at tomorrow's show too. Same place. Don't be afraid. I'll never let anything happen to you. Freddie stared at that line for a long time. Don't be afraid. He was. He folded the letter slowly, fingers numb. For a moment, the noise of the crowd outside, the distant thump of the stage being dismantled, the laughter in the corridor, all of it faded. There was only the echo of one sentence in his head. They can't. I'll always find you. A knock on the door made him jump. Freddie. Brian's voice. You all right? He cleared his throat, forcing his features back into their familiar mask. Peachy, he called. Come in. He slipped the letter and photo under a stack of magazines just as the door opened. Brian peered in, concern flickering in his eyes. You look like you've seen a ghost, he said lightly. Freddie forced a grin. Just my reflection, darling. Terrifying as always. Brian didn't press. He rarely did. They learned to give each other space in different kinds of darkness. When he left again, pulling the door gently closed behind him, Freddie exhaled and crossed the room. For the first time in his career, he turned the lock. Then the second lock. Then the third. The sound of the metal sliding into place rang louder in his ears than any applause. Tour life blurred cities together. Berlin bled into Munich, Munich into Zurich, Zurich into Vienna. Airports, hotels, arenas, corridors. Different languages, same schedule. Freddie used to love the speed of it, the way motion itself became a drug. But after the letter, movement felt different. He started noticing shadows. Not dramatic, cloak and dagger shadows. Ordinary ones. A figure lingering too long by a loading bay. A silhouette outside a hotel. A shape near the side entrance of an arena, seemingly always just far enough away to ignore and just close enough to remember. He told himself he was being dramatic. He was Freddie Mercury, for God's sake. People stared. People waited. People followed. It came with the crown. But the letter had done something insidious, it had turned the general into the specific. It had taken the nameless mass of fans, and given one of them a voice and a determination that felt like a hand on the back of his neck. You belong to me on and off the stage. I'll always find you. 3 nights later, at the hotel in Vienna, he recognized him. The lobby was its usual circus, too bright, too beige, full of people pretending not to stare. The band had just come back from dinner. Roger headed straight for the bar with a pair of local girls in tow. Brian muttered something about calling home and disappeared toward the lifts. Freddie lingered. He liked being seen. Even on his off nights, the performance didn't fully switch off. He walked through the hotel like it was another kind of stage, chin high, movements sharp, a cigarette balanced at his lips like punctuation. He was halfway across the lobby when he felt it. That stare. He didn't look immediately. He'd learned not to. Looking made it worse. But the sensation crawled up his spine. He stopped at the reception desk, making a show of asking about wake-up calls and messages. While the clerk fumbled with papers, Freddie let his gaze wander casually around the room. There. Near the potted plant by the revolving door. Dark hair. Stillness in a crowd of movement. Eyes glued to him. It was him. Up close, even at a distance, he looked younger than Freddie expected. Early 20s, maybe. Thin, a bit sallow, like someone who smoked more than he ate. He wore an unremarkable jacket, no band shirt, nothing that screamed fan. He wasn't smiling. Freddie felt his pulse pick up. He turned back to the clerk, said something flippant, took his room key, and walked toward the lifts without letting his pace change. Do not run, he told himself. You don't run from your own audience. The lift doors opened with a soft ding. He stepped inside, pressed his floor button, and just as the doors began to close, a hand shot between them. They slid open again. The young man stepped in. Freddie's chest tightened. Up close, the intensity was worse. His eyes weren't wild, that would have been easier. They were calm. Present. Too present. Freddie leaned back against the brass rail, forcing his posture to stay loose. Hello, he said, voice light, bored even. Enjoy the show. The young man's lips curved in a small, unsettling smile. Always, he said in lightly accented English. You were beautiful tonight. Freddie swallowed. So were the other 10,000, he replied. I hope you told them too. The man didn't laugh. Instead, he reached into his pocket. Every nerve in Freddie's body tensed. He pictured headlines. Assassination attempt. Mad fan attacks rock star in hotel lift. Then the stranger pulled out a photograph. He held it out. I brought this for you, he said. I took it in Munich. It's my favorite. Freddie hesitated, then took it. It was another shot from that same morning the first photo had clearly been taken. Different angle. Same hotel. Same sunglasses. Same jacket. Except this one was closer. Closer than any fan should have been. You shouldn't, Freddie began. I told you, the man interrupted gently. I always find you. The lift reached Freddie's floor and chimed. The doors slid open with a soft whoosh. Freddie stepped out so fast he almost stumbled. He turned back, forcing a smile onto his face. Lovely, he said, holding the photo up between two fingers as if it didn't weigh more than his own bones. "I'll add it to my collection." The young man watched him with that same faint smile. "I'll see you tomorrow," he said. It wasn't a question. Freddie walked down the corridor without looking back. He didn't breathe properly until his hotel room door shut behind him. The first thing he did was lock it. Then the second lock. He stared at his shaking hands, at the photograph, at his own frozen expression in it. The second thing he did was pick up the phone and ask the tour manager to increase security. The third thing he did, much later, alone, was admit something he'd never said out loud before. "I'm not safe out there. Not all the time. Not anymore." The next two shows were a blur of muscle memory and adrenaline, the kind Freddie normally lived for, but something had shifted inside him. The stage, once the safest place in his universe, had begun to feel like a spotlight on his vulnerability rather than his power. He still strutted, still teased, still reached for the impossible notes that only he could hit, but every time he stepped forward, a part of him wondered. Is he here tonight? Where is he standing? How close can he get? And every time the house lights brightened enough for Freddie to scan the front rows, the answer struck him like a cold wind. He was always there. Front row, same spot, body rigid, eyes unblinking, not singing, not clapping, not cheering. Just staring. Absorbing. Studying. By the fourth night, Freddie's performances had become disciplined defiance. He danced bigger, pushed harder, almost daring the man to blink. But the intensity of that gaze never faltered. It pressed into him through every song, every costume change, every breath. After the Vienna show, Freddie practically collapsed into the backstage hallway, sweat dripping down his chest, towel hanging loosely around his neck. He forced his posture upright, no one could ever see him weak, but his legs trembled under him more than he wanted to admit. He was halfway to his dressing room when he heard raised voices. Security. Arguing. Freddie stopped walking. A sharp alarm rang inside him. He turned the corner, and froze. Two guards were shoving someone back from the backstage entrance. Someone thin. Someone pale. Someone with dark hair, eyes wide, jaw clenched. Him. Freddie's breath hitched. The young man pushed forward again, voice sharp, urgent. "I need to talk to him. He asked for me." The guard shoved him back harder. "Sir, you need to leave the restricted area." "You don't understand," the man's voice cracked. "He saw me tonight. He knows me." Freddie stepped back into the shadow instinctively. No. 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 This wasn't happening. He wasn't supposed to see him this close. Backstage was sacred. Backstage was controlled. Backstage was safe. The fan lunged again toward the doorway. "He's expecting me." He pointed at me during Somebody to Love. Freddie's stomach turned. He remembered the gesture, he pointed at dozens of people during that song. It was part of the choreography. But this man had rewritten meaning where there was none. The guard shoved him a final time, harder. He stumbled back, dropping something from his jacket pocket. Something rectangular. It slid across the concrete floor. A photograph. Freddie's blood ran cold. The young man scrambled to pick it up, but the guard kicked it farther away. "Time to go." "I'm not leaving," the man screamed, voice cracking with desperation. "He needs me. He always needs me after he sings like that." Freddie felt sick. This wasn't adoration. This wasn't enthusiasm. This was possession. The guard grabbed the man's arm, twisting it behind his back. The fan didn't cry out in pain, he didn't even seem to notice it. His eyes stayed locked on the hallway where Freddie stood hidden in the shadows. "Freddie," he shouted, voice echoing into the concrete. "You don't have to pretend. I'm here. Freddie flinched as if struck. The guards dragged him toward the exit. His feet scraped helplessly along the floor as he twisted his body, trying to look past them. "I love you," he screamed. "I'm the only one who does. You know that." Freddie's vision blurred. He backed away slowly, heart pounding against his ribs. He had experienced obsession before: letters, hotel chases, people breaking into dressing rooms to steal tissues or costumes, but this was different. The man wasn't trying to get something from him. He was trying to get him. And worse. He believed Freddie wanted it. The guards hauled the man down the hallway until the screaming faded into muffled echoes. Freddie leaned against the wall, panting, chest heaving. Sweat dripped down the back of his neck despite the cool air. He didn't move for several seconds. When he finally stepped into the light again, he saw the photograph lying on the floor. Face down. He knew he shouldn't touch it. He knew he should walk away, tell someone else to handle it, pretend none of this was happening. But Freddie Mercury had never been able to resist a story, even the dangerous ones. He bent down. His hand trembled as he picked it up. He turned it over. It was another photo of him, but closer than ever before. He was inside a restaurant. Dim lighting. A private dinner. He was laughing, head thrown back, a moment he hadn't even known had been captured. The window in the background revealed the angle. Someone had photographed him through the glass. Freddie's heart lurched. On the back of the photo, in the same deliberate handwriting. "You looked happiest when you didn't know anyone was watching." "I was watching." His vision swam. He backed away from the photo as if it were alive, as if it were burning him. He stumbled into his dressing room, locked the door, all 3 locks, and collapsed onto the sofa. His chest tightened. The applause outside the building echoed faintly, as if coming from underwater. He pressed a trembling hand over his mouth. For the first time in his entire career, the man who had stood before crowds of 70,000 without fear, who strutted half-naked under blinding lights, who commanded stages like thrones. Freddie Mercury was afraid to perform. Because tonight, the barrier between performer and audience had broken. And something had stepped through. Freddie didn't remember walking back from the venue to the hotel. One minute he was in the dressing room, shaking, staring at the photograph like it was a loaded weapon. The next, he was standing in the elevator of the Grand Hotel, coat half-buttoned, sunglasses still on though it was nearly midnight. His hands wouldn't stop trembling. He kept seeing the man's face. The voice screaming his name. The words, "He needs me," echoing through the concrete hallway. Fame had always been a double-edged sword, but until now, Freddie had played with it like a man unafraid of getting cut. He lived loudly, boldly, dripping with charm and arrogance and theatrical brilliance. He strutted into rooms like they belonged to him, because most of the time, they did. But now, in the quiet hum of the elevator, he felt something unfamiliar creeping up his spine. Vulnerability. The doors slid open on his floor. He stepped into the hallway, then stopped. A shadow at the far end of the corridor shifted. Not a person, just the movement of curtains caught by draft. But Freddie's entire body tensed. He fumbled with his keycard, stepping inside his room so quickly he nearly tripped over the carpet. The door swung shut behind him. He locked it. Click. Second lock. Click. Chain. Click. He pressed his back against the door, breathing hard, chest rising and falling in shallow bursts. The room was dim, lit only by a single lamp. His reflection stared at him from the mirror across the room, wild-eyed, shaken, stripped of the bravado he normally wore like armor. He dropped his coat on the floor instead of hanging it. His posture was wrong, hunched, small. Freddie Mercury was never small. Yet here he was. He walked toward the minibar, grabbed a glass, and poured vodka with a hand that wasn't steady. Half of it sloshed over the rim. He drank anyway. The burn steadied him just enough to breathe. He set the empty glass down and reached into his coat pocket. The photograph, the one taken through the restaurant window, was still there, edges damp with his sweat. He placed it on the table and stared at it as if it were a threat waiting to move. His throat tightened. "Why me?" he whispered to the empty room. He had always attracted extremes, extreme love, extreme loyalty, extreme desire. But this wasn't love. This wasn't devotion. It was ownership. Someone had decided Freddie Mercury belonged to them. Someone who had gotten close enough to take photos through windows, to follow him from hotel to hotel, to track the band's movements more closely than some journalists ever had. Someone who wasn't going to stop. His chest constricted. He walked to the mirror, gripping the sides of the vanity with both hands, knuckles whitening. "You're being dramatic," he whispered to his reflection, forcing a tight smile. "You're Freddie Bloody Mercury. You don't get scared." But the reflection didn't play along. His eyes glistened. He slammed his palms against the counter. The sound cracked through the silence. "Yes, you do," he choked. "You do now." There was no use pretending, not here, not alone. The fear was real. He paced the room, muscles tight, hands running through his hair in frantic motions. He grabbed the curtains and yanked them closed, terrified he might see a silhouette on the street below watching him. He paced again. He opened the wardrobe door and checked inside like a child fearing a monster. He paced again. Then the phone rang. A shrill, sharp sound that sliced him open from the inside. He froze. Didn't move. Didn't breathe. The ringing continued. 3 times. 4. 5. He snatched the receiver with shaking fingers. "Hello?" His voice cracked embarrassingly. Silence. Freddie felt his heart thudding against his ribs like a fist. "Hello?" he repeated, louder, harsher. Still silence. He was about to slam the receiver down when a breath, just a breath, drifted through the line. A soft inhale. A shaky exhale. The bottom dropped out of Freddie's stomach. He didn't wait another second. He slammed the phone down so hard it nearly bounced off the cradle. He stumbled backward until he hit the wall and slid down to the floor. His breathing came too fast, too shallow. "No," he whispered, covering his ears as if he could block out the memory of that breath. "No, no, no." He pressed his palms to his eyes, willing himself not to cry. But the tears came anyway. Hot, humiliating. He was Freddie Mercury. He had commanded stadiums of thousands, stared down press attacks, faced scandals, heartbreaks, betrayals. He had survived a childhood where he never fit, an adulthood where he was constantly scrutinized. But tonight, he wasn't Mercury. He wasn't the god on stage. He wasn't the man who strutted in tight white trousers and made nations scream. He was Farrokh Bulsara again. A boy from Zanzibar, frightened, overwhelmed, hiding in a room that suddenly felt too small for the weight pressing against his chest. The phone rang again. He screamed. Not a dramatic scream, a raw, ripped from the gut sound he didn't know he was capable of. He crawled across the floor, ripped the cord from the wall, and hurled the phone onto the bed. His breath was shaking. His hands wouldn't unclench. His heart felt like it was trying to escape his ribcage. He crawled into the far corner of the room and pulled his knees to his chest, pressing his forehead against them. He stayed like that for a long time. Trembling. Breathing in broken gasps. Feeling the walls close around him. It took nearly an hour for him to calm down enough to stand. He wiped his face with trembling fingers and whispered. "I can't go on stage tomorrow." And for the first time in his career. He meant it. Morning light slipped through the thin hotel curtains, cutting the darkness into long pale stripes across the carpet. Freddie had not slept. He'd spent most of the night sitting upright in the armchair, staring at the door as if it might burst open at any second. Every sound, footsteps in the corridor, a dropped glass from room service, a distant elevator chime, made his muscles lock. His body wasn't used to fear. It didn't know how to carry it. His hands still trembled from adrenaline that had nowhere to go. At 9 a.m., there was a soft knock. He flinched so violently he nearly kicked the coffee table. "Freddie." Brian's voice. Gentle. Concerned. Freddie swallowed hard, wiped his face, and forced himself to breathe. He crossed the room on unsteady legs and pressed his ear to the door. "Who's with you?" "No one," Brian said. "May I come in?" Freddie closed his eyes. His finger hovered over the lock. It took him nearly a full minute to turn it. Brian stepped inside slowly, as though entering a hospital room instead of a hotel suite. His eyes swept the space, the unplugged phone, the rumpled sheets, the coat on the floor, the curtain pulled too tightly shut. And then they landed on Freddie. The change was immediate. Brian's face softened, grief flickering in his eyes like a candle shaken by wind. "Jesus, Fred." Freddie crossed his arms over his chest subconsciously, as if trying to hide how small he felt. "Don't look at me like that," he said, though the words came out thin. "I'm fine." "You're not fine," Brian said quietly. "Talk to me." Freddie opened his mouth, nothing came out. He turned away, pacing in short, frantic bursts. Brian stayed by the door, not pushing, just waiting. Letting the silence settle gently instead of forcing it open. It was that patience that broke him. Freddie stopped in the middle of the room, hands shaking uncontrollably. "He called," Freddie whispered. Brian frowned. "Who called?" Freddie's breath hitched. "Him." The word dropped like a stone. Brian's posture changed instantly, alert, grounding, protective. "What did he say?" "He didn't." Freddie wrapped his arms around himself, nails digging into his skin. "He just breathed." Brian's jaw clenched. Freddie's voice cracked. "I could feel him listening. Like he was in the room. Like he was standing right behind me." He dragged a hand through his hair. "I unplugged the phone. I hid in the corner like a bloody child." The shame burned through him, hot and corrosive. Brian stepped forward. "Fred, this isn't your fault." Freddie barked a humorless laugh. "Of course it is. I invited all of this. I made myself public. I made myself available. People think they own me." Brian didn't argue. Freddie's voice dropped to a whisper. "I'm scared, Bree." The admission hung in the air, fragile as spun glass. Freddie Mercury did not do scared. He did extravagant, dramatic, furious, stubborn, but never scared. Brian crossed the room and placed a hand on Freddie's shoulder. "It's okay to be afraid." "No, it isn't," Freddie snapped. "Not for me. If I can't stand on a stage without shaking, who the hell am I? What good am I to the band? To the fans? His voice broke. To the show?" Brian squeezed his shoulder gently. "Fred, you're not a show. You're a human being." Freddie shook his head, eyes glassy. "Not to him. To him I'm property. An idea. A thing he thinks he deserves." He walked to the window and yanked the curtains open. Daylight flooded the room, sharp and unforgiving. "There are thousands out there who love me," Freddie whispered. "And I'm terrified of one." Brian spoke softly. "That's how it works, sometimes." Freddie turned, eyes blazing with fear and confusion. What if he gets backstage again? What if he gets into the hotel? What if he follows us to the next city? "Bree, he told me he'll always find me." Brian inhaled sharply. "We'll increase security. We'll change hotels. We'll. It won't matter. Freddie exploded, voice cracking. He doesn't care about barriers or rules or locks. He thinks he and I are connected. He thinks we belong to each other. Brian didn't flinch. He stepped forward, placed both hands on Freddie's shoulders, and said firmly. You do not belong to him. You are not his anything. Freddie closed his eyes, breathing raggedly. I can't go on stage tonight, he whispered. Brian didn't look surprised. I know. Freddie's eyes snapped open. You know. You think we didn't hear the commotion last night? Brian said softly. You think we didn't notice the way security dragged that man out kicking and screaming? We've all been worried about you. Even Roger. And you know Roger doesn't worry about anything except drum skins and girls. A tiny, exhausted smile tugged at Freddie's lip. Brian continued, voice gentle. You are the soul of this band. But you're also allowed to break. You're allowed to be scared. You're allowed to take a night off. Freddie shook his head. The fans. The fans will understand, Brian said. And if they don't, that's our problem, not yours. Freddie felt something crumble inside him, not collapse, but release. He sank onto the edge of the bed. Brian sat next to him. I always thought, Freddie whispered, that the danger ended at the edge of the stage. Brian shook his head. The stage doesn't protect you. We do. Freddie looked down at his trembling hands. I don't want him to take the stage from me, he whispered. It's the only place I've ever felt like myself. Brian nodded slowly. Then we'll take it back. Not today. Not tomorrow. But when you're ready. Freddie swallowed hard. And if I'm never ready? Brian placed a hand over his. Then we'll build a new version of the world where you are. A tear slipped quietly down Freddie's cheek. He didn't wipe it. He didn't hide it. He let it fall. Because for the first time since the fear had taken hold of him, he wasn't alone inside it. He breathed, a shaky, uneven breath, but a breath nonetheless. I'll try, he whispered. And Brian smiled softly. That's enough today. Outside the hotel window, the world kept moving, crowds, cars, fans gathering with signs, flashes of cameras. But inside the room, for the first time in days, Freddie felt the faintest sense of something he hadn't dared feel since the stalking began. Safety. Not from locks. Not from walls. From being seen, truly seen, by someone who loved him without owning him. And in that fragile pocket of safety, Freddie Mercury let himself believe, just for a moment, that the stage would not be taken from him forever.